Jordi from 5G Mag. Are you out there?
I'm here, Dom. Hi, everyone.
Perfect. Excellent. I haven't got any video. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to. Give us some video. There we go. Cool. So Jordi and I spoke a little while ago, and in a slightly different sector, but similarly aligned, really common interests and so on. And I think it's really important that we as a group understand what other actors across the industry are doing. So as always with Greenstream, at the end of our monthly members meetings, we invite interesting people from around the industry to come and inspire us and tell us what they're doing and explore collaborations and so on. So this month it's Jordi from 5G Mag. Jordi, do you want to take it away and give us a sort of 5-10 minutes chat? I don't know how long you've got, so don't overrun the hour if that's critical, but if you've got time, I'm sure some of the members will have questions as well. So over to you.
That's good. I have actually some slides I can share. I won't go into all details, let's say. I prefer to share the slides afterwards, and then members can have a look at them and reach out with any questions for sure. So just to present a little bit 5G Mag. So we are a cross-industry association bringing together the media and the ICT industry. The objective is, let's say, to collaborate on implementing solutions in the space of 5G and multimedia applications. 5G has a quite wide understanding, right? So it's more, but it's more focused on mobile technologies in general. I don't think I need to explain what the challenges are at the moment, where users are, some would say, abandoning traditional distribution networks. Others would say perhaps slightly going into other spaces, right? The internet and so on. But in any case, there are challenges here in order to reach connected devices, in order to deliver new types of contents to users that go beyond the traditional, let's say, TV and radio that have been distributed over broadcast networks. And while doing this, let's say, transition, or while enabling this new space, there are issues around, obviously, quality, cost, scalability, how to bring back some sort of control, right, to the service provider, not just letting everything go and then you don't know what's going on in any sense at the user end. Security aspects for sure, and then sustainability, right? And I think the question, and I don't think we will solve this today, but the question is more, what to do, right? So it's an aspect that we know it's there. We know that content is going side by side, let's say, within networks that perhaps by nature have not been designed to deliver content or to deliver video and audio, but they are being used, right? If we see some years ago, the internet was not designed to deliver video, but at some point video was converted into files and then everything goes on the internet, right? So I think sustainability is an aspect that is there, and that we need to understand how to deal with it. Another aspect we are covering in 5G Mag is also around production, which is the other end, right? The creation of content and perhaps more aspects related to uplink streaming and computing in networks, and the same, right? So we are using infrastructure like CDNs for delivery, cloud services for managing and for content creation and so on. And everything will have an aspect related to sustainability that we need to tackle. Then 5G Mag, as I said, is a framework for collaboration between the media industry and the information and communication technology industry. So it's a place where service providers, broadcasters, technology integrators, software developers, regulators, research, and academia organizations, and so on can come and work on solutions, right? But the scope is to work on shaping the internet and global technologies like 5G as the low-hanging fruit for a kind of smart network, right? But to work on this, not on technologies that end up in silos, that perhaps was what was done before, if you look at the broadcast, with ATSC, with DVB and so on, but to work more on global technologies, shaping them to meet the requirements from the industry. We are dealing with different aspects in terms of the work, right? So there's a part that is more focused on pre-standardization, which is dealing about definition of use cases, commercial requirements or requirements that start, let's say, from a service point of view, what end up in technology requirements, right? And also assessing opportunities of all these new technologies. As I was saying, 5G, for instance, what are the opportunities that these technologies open in terms of media services and application. There is a part on standards. So 5G is not developing standards. Actually, as I said, that doesn't make sense to us. The thing is to try to shape standards that are being used for internet delivery, for instance, or that are global in terms of mobile technology and so on, to shape them, right? To understand the architectures that have been developed in these global standards, to profile the specifications, right? So you end up, for instance, in terms of 3GPP with hundreds and hundreds of pages and documents. But actually, if you want to use a particular functionality of the system, you just need to concentrate on specific chapters, specific sections, and specific blocks, let's say, building blocks. And what we do is try to profile them and to try to explain, let's say, the industry, how to implement and how to develop these applications. And then there is a part on post-standardization that is, okay, once we have defined what the technology is and should be used for, right, in terms of use case and service application, once we got the standard that is able to meet these requirements and to provide, let's say, the technology to make it feasible, well, what are the next steps, right? And then here, what I would highlight, and I'll go quickly afterwards through this, is our open source development program, where we try to implement, let's say, the architecture, the standards, APIs, and also interact with other actors, let's say, in the chain, right? So 5G, for instance, is not just isolated. Your content will have to come from a service provider, from an origin, from a CDN. Then you got many devices that can get connectivity, from fixed wireless access to smart TVs till connected cars or smartphones and so on, right? So all the scope of this, and the idea is to try to test the technology, to improve the technology, and also to detect needs, right? I was listening before, for instance, these KPIs for energy awareness and so on. I think that's a very interesting thing to test, and I would like to offer as well our tools, our reference software, in case we find out that this is useful, let's say, to test some sort of application for streaming or for broadcasting, multicast, or whatever. Just a very quick look into our work items. So what we are working on at the moment is more based on, let's say, 3GPP technology coming with 5G and so on. But we have several work items dealing with, let's say, isolated parts of the technology. We have from broadcast meaning broadcast standard based on 3GPP technologies. We are not talking here about the TSC or DVB and so on. We're talking about 3GPP. Then we have as well work items dealing with, obviously, mobile networks, right? In terms of, well, what can the standards offer in order to deliver OTT streaming, for instance, more reliable in a more reliable way. How to get insight into what's happening in the network so that we can act and, well, try to optimize this delivery to the user and so on. We are dealing as well with multicast as an option to perhaps scale when it comes to content concurrently, linear content concurrently delivered to massive audiences. There are aspects around video codecs, protocols, Dash, HLS, CMAF, and others that we'll have to look at. And then, well, as well, emergency alerts when it comes to distribution of this type of contents, and as well, we have a new work item on advanced media services, which is covering anything that is not, let's say, traditional TV and radio, that is more dealing with I don't want to say the word metaverse because perhaps nobody knows what it is, but it's more related to XR, AR, let's say more this advanced media content, which, well, it's generated in a more sophisticated way, taking into account spatial coordinates and so on, and then it will require as well other types of processing in terms of devices, in terms of consumption, and so on. So, well, this is our structure, but all of this is on the website. I will share the slides, so I won't go now into all the details. But you have here an idea, for instance, of things we develop in terms of end-to-end change for streaming, for broadcast, for hybrid broadcast and unicast, dealing with, let's say, OTT apps and so on. But I would like to go directly into our software development program, which is called the reference tools, right? So what we realized is that when it came to 5G, to 3GPP technologies, there was a lack of, let's say, well, 3GPP was dealing with the standardization, with the specifications and so on, but there was not a program to test the specifications, to provide feedback to the standardization experts once we test things and understand how they work and how they are built and so on. And then also, well, a sort of reference implementations of these new technologies, right? In order to facilitate that the industry understands what this is about, how to implement it, what is needed, what are the APIs, how it works, right? So we detected that there was a lack of this, let's say, post-standardization activity, and we created the reference tools, which is basically an open source community of developers. Let me go very quickly, which is now developing, let's say, the standards. As I said, it's not just 3GPP, but it's also, there are interactions with VA3C, with ITFS, DVB as well as a service layer, Dash when it comes to well, chunk streaming and so on. And what we are doing is to provide initial reference implementations of these technologies for media streaming, for broadcast, for setting specific quality of service policies, to expose activity from the network towards service providers in order to configure the network, to understand what's happening. I think here is where perhaps some sort of energy measurement would be interesting. Well, edge applications and so on and so on. So this is all an open community that I feel this may be interesting, as you don't have to be a member of Agimac to participate into this. And well, what we do basically is well, to develop demonstrators, to go into, well, IBC and AP and so on, in order to start, let's say, building the tools, showing how they work, improving them, and so on, right? And then, well, the expansion of this framework can be quite huge if you see all these new technologies that are coming up from 3GPP, for instance, and then also well, new ways of producing or delivering content in terms of formats, in terms of XR, in terms of more personalization, and so on. So as I said, I'll try to share the slides afterwards because I think there's too much content for today. And actually would like to hear from you if you have questions and if you see any opportunity, let's say, to collaborate further.
That's great, Jordi. Really appreciate that high level. I hope members can see why, from my initial conversation with Jordi, I could see lots of parallels, lots of ways we could potentially collaborate and so on. And actually, sort of straight off the bat, I think I would greatly value you and Alex to be very early on in giving us feedback on our Working Group 7 paper once Christoph's ready to release that beyond the members community, because the role of that working group is to promote energy as a KPI in the design of different standards and so on. And I think both groups it would just be really interesting to have your feedback on the idea and to see where you're at with energy and so on. You know, how much has any operational energy measurement featured in some of the tests and pilots and prototypes that you've been carrying out? And do you think there would be interest if we came to sort of support activities to develop that side of, you know, evaluation and so on?
So I think I believe at the moment we haven't taken this into account, let's say, right? I mean, the activities in 5G Mac are driven by members, and we all know that we share some members actually. We all know that energy or sustainability is an important aspect. However, I'm not sure we understand what to do, right? Okay. In terms of, well, it would be good, and I've seen, for instance, from ATEM, measurements, right? It would be good to understand, and perhaps from 5G Mac more into thinking of other devices than just TV, right? Perhaps where consumption can happen. And I'm thinking, for instance, of batteries, which I think it's a big waste when you go to smartphones, because the smartphone actually runs for a lot of time, but the first thing that breaks, perhaps, or that you feel like it's not charging for the same time when I bought it, that just right now, right? So I believe that energy and sustainability is an aspect that, although we have not dealt with in terms of, well, doing demos or specific KPIs and so on, I think this is something where I see the opportunity to understand what's needed, understand what are the, I don't know, APIs or how to get information from the network, how to deal with this, right? Either network, device, I mean, there are many places on the chain. Actually understanding the chain, I think it's important. And I know, Dom, you've been, and your colleagues have been working on this sort of graphic, which is really visual and right? Because sometimes you just concentrate on an aspect of the chain, but the chain is really big, right? And we need to understand actually where the issues are, right? And where the content comes, even if you are not streaming or nobody's consuming anything, and there are things that are still consuming energy, right? All these aspects are needed to be understood. And I said, well, 5G Mac is dealing with some aspects. I'm sure you are dealing with
no, I think
on energy. The best
potentially
thing
a really nice complementary fit. Really, I think it's
Right.
Potentially a really nice complementary fit, especially, you know, seeing Alex at the table today as well. It feels, oh well, we can really look at that working group 8 as it starts to form and think of it not just in the wired router domestic set-top TV environment, but also, you know, potentially keep things rolling in parallel as we develop understanding in the mobile space, which is obviously, I think, usage-wise probably prevalent, but different use cases and so on. Tim, you're off mic. You're off mute there. Please, and other members, if you've got comments, just raise your hand. I'm sure there's interesting things to talk to you about.
I definitely have a one question. And first of all, I agree that sort of combination of what we can learn, especially around things like multicast, for instance, what impact does that have on energy versus unicast? So one of the projects that I noticed on your website, and it's nice to sort of see different projects that you're working on. One of them was around 5G rural, and that's sort of an oxymoron because 5G travels a shorter distance than 4G or 3G, et cetera. But the talk there was around multicast versus unicast, you know, moving both to mobile devices as well as to fixed location. On those projects, are they driven by a specific member, or are they driven by multiple members and the group votes on which of those projects to work on?
So the projects are driven by multiple members. Actually, the rule in 5G Mac is that a work item can be started if there are minimum four members, let's say, supporting and contributing to it, right? Not to end up in everyone doing its own thing, but actually to establish some sort of more collaborative effort. When it comes to what you mentioned about multicast, so we have actually two big pieces of work, right? One would be to provide multicast / broadcast content directly into smartphones, for instance, or into 3GPP devices, right? Not using, let's say, DVB or ATSC and so on, that unfortunately are not, at least from DAB or from DVB here in Europe, you cannot find a smartphone that can consume this type of content, right? Yeah. So that's a big piece of work. The other is as well dealing with multicast as an optimization of the mobile network delivery, right? In order to, well, to aggregate several users that are going to consume, I don't know, the same football match and so on. And I think it's very important what you mentioned, right? How this can be, how can we measure the impact of using these technologies versus the traditional way, perhaps, of doing it today, where everything is dominated by unicast on one side or just broadcast in the traditional way. But I think that element is yeah, would be very interesting to understand.
Great, thanks.
Awesome. Anyone else got any questions or discussion points with Jordi? Do come off mic and go for it. Cool. Okay, well, I think we've run over a bit anyway. So, Jordi, I'd really like to thank you. I think it's just hopefully just the first of many engagements, and I think we should pick up, and in the same way we've done with the DTG, we should look at sort of maybe formalising the relationship a little bit between 5G Mag and making sure that we've got just lots of continuous awareness of what we're doing, and just to keep fingers on where we can collaborate as much as possible. So, really thank you for coming. It's really appreciated. Let me have the slides and. Let me have the slides and I'll share those out to the members and so on. And obviously members do reach out to Jordi of 5G Mag as a group that you feel is particularly of interest to get involved in as well. So